So, hi, Robbie, and thank
Hi,
you
Mina.
for joining us or for joining me with this short interview. In this interview, I would like to offer our participants or future participants of the workshop that you're going to be holding. I would like that you share a few information about yourself and about the workshop, so it would be more clear what we're going to talk about. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I'm Dr. Roby Abeles and I live in Australia. And I've been a drug and alcohol counsellor and trauma specialist for 30 years this year. And I've been recovery from my own addiction since 34 years this year. So for the past 34 years, I've really been fascinated by trauma and addiction and the connection between the two. So I have a bachelor's degree in chemical dependency counselling and a master's in spiritual psychology because I wanted to understand the connection between the sort of the soul level of people with addictions, and then I also have a clinical psychology degree. So I sort of have a lot of different training for working with people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thrilled to be able to come to Slovenia and share what I've learned over these last 34 years with your therapist there. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yeah, we're also really, really excited to have you. So thank you. So for start, I would like to ask you to tell a bit more about the addiction as an attempt for self-regulation, for self-soothing, and for the addiction that is able to give people a sense of some secure attachment or connection that they didn't have the opportunity to form before.
So I think that when I started in this field 34 years ago, we used to think of addiction as a disease. It was fully a disease model, like diabetes or cancer. So we've come a long way because we know a lot more now about the neurobiology of the brain and the neurobiology of attachment. So what happens with people who later become addicted is they tend to grow up in homes where the whole family is dysregulated in the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have anyone to help them learn how to soothe themselves. What they do is they have models of people who are looking outside themselves for soothing. So then one day they happen upon something that helps them regulate their nervous system. And then because that is such a huge relief for the person, they tend to then do it more and more and more. And the more they do it, the more they have to do it. And often what happens is they have to add in new addictions to continue to regulate themselves. So because they've got this thing that works so well for regulation, they never learn any other regulation skills. So when they get sober, we need to be able to understand that and give them new regulation skills, not just take the addiction away, because they're not just going to suddenly know how to self-soothe without their addiction. So part of the training I'll be doing is talking about what we need to do to give them other self-regulation skills. So also human beings have a very strong need to attach to other human beings for survival. So whenever something is in the survival system in the brain, the brain won't give up until that survival need is met. So if a child grows up in a family where there's insecure attachment to the major caregivers, they will look for something else to attach to that gives them more of a secure attachment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. For me, definitely. Yeah.
So then they find something, and often for children it's food, something in their environment that they can attach to, and it serves as that secure parent, so that it's there for them when they need soothing, it's there for them when they need some kind of connection. So then as well, they start to learn not to go to people for soothing, but to continue to go to, and often with children, it's also, thumb sucking or other things that they start to do instead of going to a parent.
Or television or telephone, you know.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Something else that's available whenever they need it. And then go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you know, because a lot of people say, you know, they can just stop, you know, if they know that they're addicted to something and it's giving them a hard time or is giving them really negative consequences, why can't they just stop? So partly you've already answered this question, because this is the only self-soothing and self-regulating mechanism that they basically have. And do you would like to add something more about this, you know, a little prejudicial thought or saying that a lot of people are still having about addiction?
Yes, so it doesn't make sense to us why someone would continue to do something that's hurting them and everyone around them and making them miserable. I'll be talking in the training about the neurophysiology involved in that. But it's also because the system in the brain, so let me back up. So when in primitive times, when a tribe would find a source of fresh water or food, the brain would get a big hit of dopamine. When we do drugs and have addictions, the brain gets a big hit of dopamine. So the brain is actually reading the addiction as necessary for survival, just like it did when we were walking the planet, you know, millions of years ago, and we found fresh water. So the brain thinks when there's a big hit of dopamine, that thing that we're doing is necessary for our survival. So the brain won't let go of something that it thinks you need for survival easily. So we have to tell it. Also won't let go of a reward unless it gets a reward that's equal or better. So the reason people can't stop doing it is because the brain thinks they actually need it to survive, like oxygen or food. So once I found that out, it made so much sense to me that, you know, people keep doing it because the body thinks it's like oxygen, that they have to have it. So there's this drive towards it, but then there's a pull away from it, and which is the same as disorganized attachment with a person. You know, we're pulled to connect with that person, but when we get there, we get hurt. So I think addiction is also like a disorganized attachment to a parent.
And so a lot of times also people who have disorganized attachment style actually develop addiction. So it goes hand in hand.
Yes, because it's so familiar. And I think what happens with people is when they start the addiction, they have a secure attachment with it. So it's there when they need it. It fulfills their needs every time they do it. You know, it's like having a couple of glasses of wine when you get home from work. And it consistently helps you to relax. So you have a secure attachment then to that behavior. But if you're an alcoholic, you get more and more alcohol, and then you start to have an insecure attachment with the alcohol, and eventually you end up with disorganized attachment with the alcohol. Just like the family you grew up in.
So you were talking before about neurobiology of addiction. Can you tell us a little bit more of how does your crocodile setup method actually influence the neurobiology of addiction? So how does it fit?
So what I found out was I started doing a lot of research and found the big thing with addiction is it's a lot about connection and lack of connection. So then I start with people on the outside. So then I started thinking, is there also a lack of connection inside the brain? And I found some articles that say, yes, that's absolutely accurate. So that when a person is in craving, really in desire for that addiction, the part of the brain that holds the consequences is pushed away. It's not, they're not connected. When you're in craving, you're not connected with your consequences. So what the crocodile setup does is uses a double spot to connect the consequences to the craving. And I think what it's doing is creating a bridge or a neural network so that when people go into craving, they are also able to access and know about their consequences. it's like when people, they're on a diet, but they see that piece of cake
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and they just eat it. And then they go, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. I've got high blood pressure. I've got diabetes. But the brain has good reasons to be able to separate us from negative consequences to give us rewards. So it's that same system that's pre-existing in the brain that actually ends up working against the addict.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the Crocodile setup is creating a neural network to connect the two. So then when people think of using doing the behavior, they are immediately able to connect to their negative consequences. And that's making a huge difference in the lives of the addicts because they don't want the consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the workshop, we're going to learn the Crocodile setup, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And practice.
So what are your experiences with this method? I guess they're quite good, right?
Yes. So so there's a Facebook page for brain spotting and addiction. So I've written it all there, and people all over the world are using it with amazing results. And they're using it also for things that you wouldn't think, are so much addiction. So people are using it in domestic violence couples, where the one person who is more the victim is people are doing the Crocodile setup to connect going back with the person to the consequences. And so those people are able to leave the toxic relationship, whereas before they have not been able to. People are using it to stop people cutting. So, and I had a email the other day from someone who was able to help a family member in the last stages of lung cancer who was still smoking with horrible stuff happening when they were smoking. And they did this Crocodile setup over 3 times over 3 days, and the person stopped smoking.
Wow.
So it's been amazing. And for example, I had a client who used to visit sex workers. So in Australia, brothels are legal, like in Amsterdam. And after we did the Crocodile setup, he walked past a brothel and his thought was, oh, how funny, I used to go to those places. So people are not having to make any effort at all to stop the behavior consciously. So it's not like they're, standing outside the brothel saying, oh, I wish I could go in. No, I shouldn't. It's effortless for people to, after, and you might have to do the Crocodile setup with them on 3 separate occasions. But usually it's 1 to 2 sessions and they're not interested anymore.
Wow.
So it's really fascinating.
Yeah. Good.
Yes. So everyone should bring their addiction with them so that they can get rid of it.
Because everyone has them, right?
Everyone has something, and I've just been in Brazil last weekend teaching a group of 26 Brazilian therapists. And the big addiction there is workaholism. Just really working crazy hours. And so there are some things that someone asked me at the end of that training, can people have a normal relationship with whatever that addiction was after the Crocodile setup? So I think with certain process addictions, yes, absolutely, like work, you can achieve more balance. Or, anything else that's to do, exercise, food, all those sorts of things, you can just achieve balance. I'm not so sure about, continuing to use cocaine recreationally. But it's possible. I don't know. So, but yes, people can when I did the first training in Australia a few years ago, the demonstration volunteer worked on her codependency with her romantic partners. And since then, it's completely changed everything for her. In September last year, my demonstration volunteer worked on his over drinking, and he has not been interested in drinking since that first demo. So people are having really instant results,
Yeah.
which seem to be permanent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what I wanted to do with, helping addicts was to make not using the addiction easy, effortless, and not a struggle, because they've struggled enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's what's happened with the Crocodile setup, is that people are just don't want to do it anymore. No interest, just disinterest in it, which is amazing.
Yeah. Great, Robbie. Thank you so much. I'm really, really, really looking forward for this. So,
Me too. Me too.
thank you.
I'm very excited. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure to be able to come.
Yeah.